why you're here, Mr. Wordsworth?
Yes, sir.
I'd ask you to speak up a little, if you will.
Yes, sir. I know why I am here.
You've been under investigation, Mr. Wordsworth, for the mandatory period of 1 year and 11 months. You're found to be obsolete. The purpose of this hearing is to make a finding in the matter and make a sentence accordingly. Do you understand that?
I understand that.
Your occupation, Mr.
A
Wordsworth?
radio talk show host.
What?
A radio talk show host, sir.
I'm told you've had counsel and been given orientation, Mr. Wordsworth, but I'm still not sure in my own mind that you understand the purpose of this hearing. The field investigators in your sector have classified you as obsolete. This finding carries with it serious implications. Do you understand that, Mr. Wordsworth? Now I ask you again, your occupation?
I am a radio talk show host. That is my occupation, my profession. If you people choose to call that obsolete...
Request clarification of the term? Yes, the term. Mr. Wordsworth, you people, you make reference to the state?
I make reference to the state.
And you persist in declaring your occupation, correct?
That is correct.
A minister. A minister would tell us that his function is that of preaching the word of God. And of course it follows that since the state has proven that there is no God, that would make the function of a minister somewhat academic as well.
There is a God.
You are in error, Mr. Wordsworth. There is no God. The state has proven that there is no God.
You cannot erase God with an edict.
You are obsolete, Mr. Wordsworth. You have no function, Mr. Wordsworth. You're an anachronism, like a ghost from another time.
I am nothing more than a reminder to you that you cannot destroy truth.
You're a bug, Mr. Wordsworth, a crawling insect, an ugly, misformed little creature who has no purpose here, no meaning.
I am a human being. I exist. And if I speak one thought out loud, that thought exists, even after I'm shoveled into my grave.
Delusions, Mr. Wordsworth. Delusions, the Bible, poetry, essays, all kinds, all of it illuminating to make you think you have a strength when you have no strength at all. You have nothing but spindly limbs and a dream, and the state has no use for your kind.
Yeah? Well, we're gonna have to do something about that. This is RiverWestRadio.com, community-supported radio, streaming live from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm your host. My name is Michael Wordsworth, and welcome to Breaking Down the News, the show that presents the news highlights of the week, but with a twist. Breaking Down the News is more concerned in bringing you information that wasn't covered on the front pages. Headlines you don't want to miss, because not listening could be dangerous to your freedom, liberty, and health. Good afternoon and welcome to this May 25th Friday show of Breaking Down the News. I'm Michael Wordsworth, and these are words worth listening to. China is the big topic of the day on Breaking Down the News. I reported on the massive buyout of U.S. land and infrastructure by the Chinese last week, and now I'd like to follow up with a whole new slew of info that brings to light the incredible effect China is having on our country as of late. One topic that has caught the mainstream media's attention is the recent surge in the direct bid takedown participation in Treasury auctions. Today, the Financial Times dedicates an entire article to questioning just who may be bucking the trend in opinions and going all out in their purchases of treasuries as a direct bidder. Quote from the Financial Times, market participants say the unusually high level of direct bidding suggests that a large investor is looking to accumulate treasuries without alerting the primary dealers on Wall Street to its intentions. It appears to us that someone is trying to hide their apparent interest in owning these auctions from the rest of the market, said David Ader, strategist at CRT Capital. Rick Klingman, managing director at BNP Paribas, said it is unusual to see such a spike in the direct bid, and I would imagine it is one big bidder. There is no way we will find out who it is, not now or ever. Really? I would disagree with Mr. Clayman. I would also disagree with Mr. Santelli that the mysterious direct bid is merely the Fed doing an undercover quantitative easing. We all know that the Federal Reserve purchasing treasuries does so either directly or through its primary dealer lapdogs, who come hell or high water will provide a bid floor, as a failed auction is the number one black swan that will promptly set the whole house of cards tumbling faster than Lloyd Blankfein can yell bank run in the middle of a group of a G30 meeting. Primary dealers will always satisfy whatever buying interest the Fed informs them to indicate, which makes us believe we have to look offshore for the direct bidder. Well, we're looking offshore today across the Pacific Ocean at China. It's amazing how much impact China has and how much news I myself was not aware of. Of course, other great people out there have been aware of it, and thank God for them. They've been bringing it, collecting it. It's a massive amount of information, and I am going to do my best today to share it with you. Just because you were once the most powerful nation on earth does not mean that you will always be the most powerful nation on earth. Every single year, hundreds of billions of dollars leave the United States and goes to China. This enormous transfer of wealth has had a dramatic effect on both countries. In case you haven't noticed, many of our formerly great manufacturing cities, such as Detroit, are rotting away, while shiny new factories and skyscrapers are going up all over China. If you go into any major retail store today and start turning over products, you will find that hundreds of them have been made in China. That's right. And that very few of them have been made where? Here in America. As a nation, we buy far, far more from China than they buy from us. As a result, China is absolutely swimming in cash, and they have been looking for things to do with all that money. One thing that China has done is to loan the U.S. government over $1 trillion, and this has given the Chinese a tremendous amount of leverage over us. China has also started to buy up businesses, real estate, and natural resources all over America. Is that alarming to you? It's alarming to me. Once you realize how much they have been buying up business, real estate, natural resources, you'd be concerned. This kind of economic colonization is similar to what China has already been doing in Africa, South America, and Australia. Later, we're going to cover the article about Australia, China asking them, you got to choose sides here. Which one's it going to be? That in a minute, but for now, we're talking about China and its effects on the United States. China buying up our businesses and infrastructure. If you have an opinion on the subject, feel free. Call in at 414-935-2951. Phone lines are always open here. We want to hear if you agree or disagree with anything going on in this show. The point is to get us more informed, to get us aware. So the formula is actually very simple. Here's how, let me break it down for you. We send them our money, and then they use it to buy us. And by us, I mean the U.S. With each passing day, China's ownership over America grows, and it is frightening to me to think about where all this could end. I pulled up some little facts regarding China and us and how it's been going here in the 21st century, and maybe these will provoke some interesting points in your mind. Here's it was recently announced right here that China's Dalian Wanda Group has bought U.S. movie theaters chain known as AMC Entertainment. We all know AMC Entertainment. They recently purchased them for a whopping $2.6 billion. And this deal represents China's biggest corporate takeover of a U.S. firm as of yet. Well, earlier this month, the Federal Reserve announced that it has given approval for banks owned by the Chinese government to buy stakes in U.S.-owned banks. And a few days ago, Reuters reported that China is now able to completely bypass Wall Street and purchase U.S. debt directly from the U.S. Treasury Department. A recent investigation by the U.S. Senate Committee on Armed Services found more than 1 million counterfeit Chinese parts in the Department of Defense supply chain. How in the world could we be so stupid? Did you know that China makes a good portion of our parts that we use in our military, on our military equipment, to potentially... China is one of the guys that we could end up against in a global war. They're attempting to take over the world's reserve currency. I think they're going to get away with it, too. More on that in a minute. Well, after being bailed out by U.S. taxpayers, General Motors is currently involved in 11 joint ventures with companies owned by the Chinese government. I don't see how that's going to help our economy. The price for entering into many of these joint ventures was a transfer of the state-of-art technology from General Motors to the communist Chinese. Let's not mention about all the moving GM down to Brazil, but we got to send it to the Chinese. No wonder things aren't getting better. And we say we're in a recovery. Hey, a Chinese company known as Sino Michigan Properties, LLC, I reported on this last week. They purchased 200 acres of land near the town of Milan, Michigan. And the goal is to build a China city with artificial lakes, a Chinese cultural center, and hundreds of housing units for Chinese citizens. Doesn't that sound nice? It seems like, isn't that one? Why don't we just sell all little parts of it? We won't even be the United States anymore. We could just be the United States of China, I guess. Well, as I reported on recently, corporations controlled by the Chinese government have been rapidly buying up U.S. oil and gas deposits worth billions of dollars. Chinese investors have been gobbling up real estate all over New York City. Here's a report following from a recent Forbes article. According to a recent report in the New York Times, investors from China are snapping up luxury apartments and are planning to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on commercial and residential projects like Atlantic Yards in Brooklyn. Chinese companies also have signed major leases at the Empire State Building and at One World Trade Center, the report said. The Chinese are also doing huge real estate deals in cities in the middle part of the country. Here, the following example is from an article in the Toledo Blade. Dashing Pacific Group Ltd. Limited, which has already purchased the nearby Docks restaurant complex for $2.15 million, put its $3.8 million offered to buy the southern 69 acres at the Marina District in East Toledo back on the table for approval by the Toledo City Council. Additionally, Dashing Pacific Chairman Yuan Xianghong, in a letter signed in Hangzhou, said the firm wants a 2-year option to buy the decommissioned Toledo Edison power plant property on the site. It doesn't end there, folks. The facts keep coming in. There's so much more on China. Right here on ABC News. According to ABC News, major road and bridge projects all over the United States are being built by Chinese companies. I wonder, is that helping us here? Meanwhile, while they're buying these up, there are millions upon millions of blue-collar American workers that cannot find jobs. Do you see a connection here? Here's a brief excerpt from a recent ABC News article. In New York, there is $400 million renovation project on the Alexander Hamilton Bridge. In California, there is a $7.2 billion project to rebuild the Bay Bridge connecting San Francisco and Oakland. In Alaska, there's a proposal for a $190 million bridge project. I don't know what that's about, but it's in Alaska. These projects sound like steps in the right direction, but much of the work is going to the Chinese government-owned firms, which, do the math, it goes offshore. It's not going to help us. When we subsidize jobs in China, we're not creating any wealth in the United States. It's pretty simple, but here we go. The New World Trade Center tower is going to include glass that has been imported from China. Not a big deal. I mean, I guess everything's been imported in China. But would it hurt to have somebody here in America make it? The new Martin Luther King Memorial on the National Mall was made in China. Isn't it something? I guess America just sounds cliche, but we're made in China. And then check out this incredible. Well, there's this photo. I wish I could post it here. We're on radio, but the photo contrasts the decline of Detroit over the years with the amazing rise of Shanghai, China. I mean, if you compare the two of them, it's incredible. Detroit, once prosperous, looks like a leveled war zone, and Shanghai, China, once a teeny little shanty town practically, is now a bustling skyscraper-ridden metroplex. A couple of years ago, a large Chinese company was considering building a 10,000 to 30,000 acre technology zone for industry. That's a lot. 10 to 30,000 acre technology zone for industry, retail centers, and homes just south of Boise, Idaho. Are you serious? Our trade deficit with China in 2011 was $295.5 billion, I believe. That was the largest trade deficit that one country has had with another country in the history of the planet. Also in 2011, our trade deficit with China was 28 times larger than it was back in 1990 and more than 49,000 times larger than it was back in 1985. That's a huge increase. Back in 1998, the United States had 25% of the world's high-tech export market, and China had just a little teeny tiny 10%. Today, China's high-tech exports are more than twice the size of U.S. high-tech exports. Part of the reason is they externalize their costs. Over there, while they've been busy deindustrializing the Western nations, they've been moving all the manufacturing and industry to third world nations and China, and there's no EPA regulations over there. You know, that pollution, the mercury, it shoots up into the air from their coal plants because they don't have to regulate them like our coal plants do. Comes right back down here, settles in Lake Michigan, messes up everything. America has lost more than a quarter of all its high-tech manufacturing jobs over the past 10 years. We need to wake up and consider what's going on and stop this trend. According to the Economic Policy Institute, America is losing 500,000 jobs to China every single year. The U.S. spends about $4 on goods and services from China for every $1 that China spends on goods and services from the United States. Does that sound like fair trade to you? If you have a comment or would like to say something, the number to call is 414-935-2951. While we allow Chinese goods to freely flood our shores, China just keeps slapping new tariffs on American-made goods. According to the New York Times, a Jeep Grand Cherokee that cost $27,490 in the United States costs about $85,000 in China thanks to all the tariffs. We're not going to sell too many $85,000 Jeep Grand Cherokees. Why don't we raise our tariffs? That's a whole nother topic for a whole nother show, but it sounds like a good place to start. According to U.S. Representative Betty Sutton, an average of 23 manufacturing facilities a day closed down in the United States during 2010. The United States has lost an average of approximately 50,000 manufacturing jobs a month. 50,000 a month. More than 56,000 manufacturing facilities in the United States have been shut down since China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001. Holy schmoly, that's quite a jump. The United States has lost a staggering 32% of its manufacturing jobs since the year 2000. And between December 2000 and December 2010, 38% of the manufacturing jobs in Ohio, gone. 42% of the manufacturing jobs in North Carolina were lost, and 48% of the manufacturing jobs in Michigan, as you would expect, they're gone. In 2010, China produced more than twice as many automobiles as the United States did. And that's amazing because we really were the car capital of the world there for a while. I know Toyota's manufacturing their trucks and whatnot here in America. So it's there's a somewhat of a balance there. At least we get the jobs. In this case, we don't get the jobs. Of course, the Chinese, we don't buy China-made cars yet. And oh, boy, if that ever started, huh? Well, in 2010, China produced 612 627 million metric tons of steel. That's a lot of cars, but the United States only produced 80 million metric tons of steel. Steel. I mean, America is known for its high-grade quality steel. At least at one time we were. And now we're getting our butts kicked. They're producing 627 million tons of it, and we're only producing 80 million? I don't know what's happening. It seems evident from these facts that it's going to China. China probably, they want to become the world's reserve currency. If that happens, you and I will be peasants, broke and poor. We won't have a political will anymore over here. That's just not some crazy commie scare talk. It's just a fact, an economic fact. China, they lead us in cotton production right now. 7.3 million metric tons of cotton. The United States only produced 3.4. I mean, that's almost twice as much right there. Today, China produces nearly twice as much beer as the United States does. I guarantee you, we drink twice as much beer as China. Probably 10 times the amount. For the entire 1 billion population in China, we probably drink more beer than they do. 85% of all artificial Christmas trees, they're made in China. Christmas is even brought to you by China. China is now the #1 producer of wind and solar power on the entire globe. No wonder. After the Solyndra scandal where the government it's amazing. We cannot get one tech company off the ground to produce an effective means of solar energy. The Chinese, they're like, we can do it. Chinese solar panel production was about 50 times larger in 2010 than it was in 2005. It's a big jump. Right now, China's producing more than 3 times as much coal as the United States does. And keep in mind, they don't have the EP regulation. They're not scrubbing that mercury out. China is now the #1 supplier of components critical to the operation of U.S. defense systems. Now, that is... When I heard that, I was just blown away thinking, potentially, God forbid, we could be in a war with these people at some point. Could be quite sooner after some of the articles I'm going to read coming up. The tensions between China and us are really rising. China's very industrious right now. And we're deindustrializing, losing our jobs and slowing our manufacturing down, especially of raw materials like steel, coal. Well, they're producing more than 3 times as much coal as the United States does. It's a good estimate, 3 times as much as us. China is now the #1 supplier of components for our military defense systems. According to the author Clyde Prestowitz, China's #1 export to the U.S. is computer equipment. And then we recycle all of our old electronics back to them. They somehow manage to recycle them and reuse them, but we can't do that. And then they sell them back to us. They can beat us in the market because they have slaves. You can call them another term, but a low-wage worker is a slave. They don't have workers' rights. And nobody in America could last long if we operated under the same conditions they did. Our middle class would be gone. It's as simple as that. And according to an article in the U.S. News and World Report, during 2010, the #1 U.S. export to China was scrap and trash. I guess that makes sense. I mean, if we're consuming and that's all we do anymore, we got to send our trash and make money off of it. I wish it was a good idea, but it's not a good indication that things are running right. According to Professor Alan Blinder of Princeton University, 40 million more U.S. jobs could be sent offshore over the next 2 decades. Well, thank you, sir, for giving us that perspective, but I don't think we got 2 decades of America even being a country with everything continuing as it is. At that point ain't going to matter too much. The United States has been the leading consumer of energy on the globe for about 100 years, but during the summer of 2010, China took over the #1 spot. So 15 years ago, China was 14th in the world in published scientific research articles, but now China is expected to pass the United States and become #1 very shortly. China now awards more doctoral degrees in engineering each year than the United States does. China now possesses the fastest supercomputer on the entire planet. They have the world's fastest train and the world's most extensive high-speed rail network. You didn't know that China's been busy? Well, it's not in our news, but it is if you dig deep and read and look for it, but it's not being put to the forefront of our consciousness, definitely. The Chinese economy has actually grown 7 times faster than the U.S. economy has over the past decade. Their economy is projected to be larger than the U.S. economy by 2016. That's, 4 years, 3.5 years off? Yeah, prepare for that one. That's probably when they'll take over as the world's reserve currency too, and we'll be worse peasants than we are now. One economist is projecting. I tell you, it's worse. It's worse being a peasant when you can't find a job. I mean, even the pathetic jobs we have available now will not be available to us. It's hard to imagine such a life, but ouch, it's coming. It is coming. They're saying that the Chinese economy will be 3 times larger than the U.S. by 2040. We ain't going to make it to 2040. We ain't going to make it to 2020. China, they might. They might be the new dominant power in the world. You don't care, you say? Oh, well, I don't even want to touch that. I will touch on a little bit later how that's going to affect us, if you're really interested. If you were alive back when Jesus was born and you had spent $1 million every single day since then, you would not have spent that much money by now. China now holds approximately $1.17 trillion of U.S. government debt. That's I've heard numbers between 1.17 and 1.5. A couple of years ago, they said, look, we need to manage this risk because if the dollar keeps devaluing, these guys get hurt. So why would they want to hold such reserve cash? They do. They're the largest holder now. They probably have more cash, more American currency than the United States does. Well, in mentioning all the statistics that I just read to you, I relied heavily on 2 articles that you could check out, but just Google in the news China and our economy. You will find tons of reporters trying to bring this issue to light. Let people know that thanks to the foolishness of our politicians, today American workers have to compete directly for jobs with workers on the other side of the globe where it's legal to pay slave labor wages. I mean, we should be concerned about slavery anywhere. But in this case, you should be concerned that you cannot compete in the market with slave labor. I mean, all the union members out there, I'm sure you understand this. Do you want your standard of living to continue to descend toward the level of a communist worker, making about $1 an hour? How will you raise your families on that? Just don't even have kids, huh? Do you want tens of millions of Americans workers to be unemployed indefinitely and as millions of good jobs continue to leave the country? Well, if you don't, you better stand up and say something while you still can. The greatest economy the world has ever seen is falling to pieces right in front of our eyes, and most Americans are dead asleep. Is there any hope for us? I only hope that there is hope for us. I'm Michael Wordsworth. You're listening to Breaking Down the News. We'll be right back. You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com. Brewing a conflict with China. Washington has pressured the Philippines, whose government it owns. We own the Philippine government, have for a long time. Now, I should say we, because we don't actually run this government anymore. Well, Washington has pressured the Philippines into conducting joint military exercises in the South China Sea. Washington's excuse? is that China has territorial disputes with the Philippines, Indonesia, and other countries concerning island and land and sea rights in the South China Sea. Washington asserts that China's territorial disputes with the like of Indonesia and the Philippines are a matter of United States national interest. Well, yes, they are. They have been. I guess the global domination continues. It's a battle. Washington has not made it clear what Washington's stake is in the disputes, though. The reason Washington cannot identify why China's disputes with the Philippines and Indonesia are threats to the United States is that there is no reason. Nevertheless, the undefined threat has become the reason Washington needs more naval bases in the Philippines and South Korea. What this is all about is provoking a long-term Cold War conflict with China that will keep profits and power flowing into Washington's military. The industrial military complex, as we call it. Large profits flow to armaments companies. A portion of the profits reflow into campaign contributions to the, quote, the people's representatives in D.C. and to presidential candidates who openly sell out their country to private interests. Washington is going to construct new naval bases in the Philippines and on the environmentally protected Jeju Island, which belongs to the South Korea. Well, will our politicians, will our foreign policy waste tax revenues in this way, or print more money in order to build the unnecessary fleets to occupy these bases? Washington is acquiring bases in Australia for U.S. Marines to protect Australia from China, and there's a good reason for that, because China wants them to pick, more on that in a moment, pick which side they want to belong to. Have you ever played Risk? The board game Risk with the little cannons and soldiers, and you take over with the armies? Any good Risk player knows how important Australia and Indonesia is to holding the Asian mainland. Well, despite the lack of Chinese threats against Australia, they're still deciding. It's a tough one. Who's going to be on the winning side? I'd hate to make that decision. Bush and Obama are the leading models of the people's president who sell out the people at home and abroad to private interests. And here's why. You got to ask, why is Washington ramping up a new Cold War? Why is Washington ramping up a new Cold War with China? Well, the Russian Cold War is over. The current threat of terrorism was announced as being something that's done with. Seriously, after Osama bin Laden was allegedly assassinated by our special forces, Osama been dead a while, thrown overboard, and terrorism now just seems to be lacking the impact for justifying all this military spending. But a Cold War with China, ooh, that would do it. That would definitely do it. Well, the answer to why Washington wants a new Cold War begins with President Eisenhower's warning to the American people in his last public address about the military-industrial complex, which in 1961, he was trying to warn us back then. I won't quote the warning as it's available online anywhere. You can read the whole thing. But Eisenhower pointed out to Americans that unlike previous wars after the U.S. demilitarized, after World War II, the Cold War with the Soviet Union kept the power and profits flowing into the military-industrial complex, now known as the military security complex. President Eisenhower said that the flow of power and profit into the military-industrial complex was a threat to the economic well-being and liberty of the American people, and he was right. No one paid any attention, and the military security complex was glad to be rid of the five-star general war hero president when his second term expired. Thanks to the hype about the Soviet threat, the military security complex faced an unlimited horizon of mounting profits and power as the Americans sacrificed their future to the interest of those who protected Americans from the Soviet threat. The good times rolled for the armaments company and the security agencies for almost 3 decades until Reagan and Gorbachev reached agreement and ended the Cold War. When the Soviet Union subsequently collapsed, the future outlook for the power and profit of the U.S. military security complex was bleak. The 1% was about to lose its fortunes, and the secret government was about to lose its power. The military security complex went to work to revive the need for a massive defense and security budget, and they found it. Among their willing tools were the neoconservatives. With their French Jacobin ideology and Israeli loyalties, the neocons defined America as the indispensable people. We're just extraordinary people as Americans like us must establish hegemony over the world as the sole remaining superpower. As most neoconservatives are allied with Israel, the Muslim Middle East became the target of opportunity. Muslims are sufficiently different from Westerners that they are easy to demonize. The demonization began in the neoconservative publications. Once Dick Cheney had the George W. Bush regime staffed with neoconservatives, the next step was to create threats, supposed threats to Americans out of verbiage about the Taliban's responsibility for 9/11 and about Iraqi weapons of mass destruction, including verbal images from Bush's national security advisor of, remember that, of mushroom clouds. We could have mushroom clouds over U.S. cities if we don't invade Iraq. Well, you know, that's a big... that's a... Well, what is that like? That's like saying, we better fix the problem or we're just going to die. It was dire. I mean, what a big lie. One of the big, like Hitler said, the bigger the lie, the more it's believed. No one in the U.S. government or the free U.S. media or the media of the U.S. puppet states in England and Europe, let's include Japan, Taiwan, Canada, Australia, South Korea. They were all struck by Washington's proposition that the world's sole superpower was threatened by the likes of Iraq and Iran. I mean, with all of our might and defense, these two little countries are going to do us in, just like the Soviets are going to do us in. Neither of which, Iraq nor Iran, had any offensive military capability or any modern weapons. According to the unequivocal reports of the weapons inspectors themselves, they said it was a mistake. No weapons of mass destruction. What kind of superpower like us is threatened by Iraq and Iran? Certainly not a real one. No one seemed to notice that the alleged 9/11 hijackers were Saudi Arabians, not Afghans or Iraqis. I mean, 14 guys from Saudi Arabia allegedly blew up the trade towers and attacked the Pentagon, and we went into Afghanistan to secure the opium and prepare a ground war for Iraq. Yet it was Afghanistan and Iraq that were labeled terrorist threats. Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, which do terrorize their subjects, are safe from having America bring them democracy because they are Washington's puppets, not independent countries. As fear of non-entities swept over the population of the world's sole superpower, the demands for war against America's enemies. You are with us or you're against us. This attitude swept through the country. Support the troops, they said. Plastic ribbons appeared on American cars. Americans went into a frenzy with that crap. The towelheads were after us, and we had to fight for our lives or be murdered in our beds. Shopping centers, wherever. Airline seats. Oh, they're going to get you on the plane. It was all a hoax to replace the Soviet threat with the Muslim threat. The problem that developed with the Muslim threat is that in order to keep the profits of power flowing into the military-industrial complex, the promised 6-week war in Iraq had to be extended into 8 freaking years. You remember, we were going to go in, get out, 8 years of that crap. The war in Afghanistan against a few thousand lightly armed Taliban has persisted now for more than a decade, longer than the attempted Red Army occupation of Afghanistan. Remember, the Russians were in there before us. In other words, the problem with hot wars is that the need not to win them in order to keep them going. You don't need to win them. You just need to start them and keep them going and make money off of it. That's how the profits and power continue to flow into the military security complex, and it demoralizes the U.S. military and creates the worldwide impression that the world's sole superpower, us, the United States, cannot even defeat a few thousand insurgents armed with AK-47s, much less a real army. Well, we know that's not true, so why all the concern, the threat? In Iraq and Afghanistan, more U.S. soldiers have died from demoralization and suicides than from combat. In Iraq, the U.S. was humiliated by having to end the war by putting the Sunni insurgents on the U.S. military payroll and paying them to stop killing U.S. troops. We bought them off. In Korea, the U.S. was stopped by an army of backward third world country that lived on rice. What would happen today if the U.S. superpowers militarily confronted China, a country with an economy on which the U.S. first off is dependent? They're about equal in size to the U.S. economy right now, operating on its home territory. Could you imagine us conducting a war there? The only chance the evil in Washington would have would be a nuclear war, which would mean the destruction of the entire world probably by Washington's ignorant hubris. Fortunately, profits are more important to Washington than ending life on Earth. Therefore, with China, a war will be avoided, just as it was avoided with the Soviet Union. However, China will be presented by Washington and its prostitute media, the corporate media whores, especially the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Murdoch's collection of whores. Well, they're going to continue putting out that there's a rising threat to America. The media story will shift the importance of America's allies from Europe to countries bordering the South China Sea. Watch for this trend. American taxpayers' money or newly printed money will flow into the new alliance against China. China's rise is a great boon to the U.S. military security complex, which governs America, in which there is a pretense of freedom and democracy. There isn't, but there's the pretense. There's a shred of it left, and we gotta be hyper vigilant to preserve it. China is the profitable replacement for the Soviet threat. As the days go by, the prostitute media will create in the feeble minds of Americans the new China threat. That's right. It's shifting. Again, watch it. I'm telling you now, and you'll see it unfold at one point coming up. I'm not sure when they'll start the propaganda, but they're going to start putting out at some point here relatively soon that China is the new threat. And soon, whatever little remains of the U.S. living standard will be sacrificed to Washington's confrontation with China, along with the seizure of our pensions, our personal savings in order to deter the new China threat. If only Americans were an intelligent people, then they might have some prospect of holding on to their incomes, remaining wealthy, and liberty. Unfortunately, Americans are so thoroughly plugged into the matrix that they present as a doomed people, incapable of thought, reason, or ability to comprehend the facts that the rest of the world sees clearly. Can reality be brought to the American people? Perhaps a miracle will occur. Stay tuned. I'm Michael Wordsworth. We're breaking down the news today till 6 o'clock. China warns Australia. You got to choose between America or China. This article is from oilprice.com by John Daly on Tuesday, 22nd May 2012. He put it out. Notice that China warns Australia to choose a godfather. Take your pick. It's going to be us or the U.S. It is rare in diplomatic circles for governments to speak bluntly, particularly in the Orient, where manners are highly prized. The exceptions to this rule are retired military officers who are often able to voice sentiments too impolitic for other channels. One of the more startling pronouncements in this vein occurred last week when Song Xiaojun, a former senior officer at the People's Liberation Army, warned that Australia cannot juggle its relationships with the United States and China indefinitely, and that Australia has to find a godfather sooner or later. Australia has always had to depend on somebody else, whether it was to be the son or the U.S. or the son of China. Take your pick. It depends on who is more powerful and based on the strategic environment. Noting the rising importance of China as an export market, Song added that Australia depended on exporting iron ore to China to feed itself, but frankly has not done well politically. China, good afternoon, sir. China paper warns of impact from Euro crisis, calling it a Black Death. It's from Beijing, provided by Reuters. The Black Death of debt crisis across the Eurozone will hurt China by sapping demand for exports. Although Beijing's relatively small holdings of euro assets will limit any damage to foreign exchange reserves, the nation's top official newspaper said on Monday. The bleak diagnosis for the euro's prospects appeared in the overseas edition of the People's Daily, the top newspaper of China's ruling Communist Party. In a commentary by a former central bank official and an economist for the state-owned China Development Bank, the commentary in the People's Daily does not reflect a definitive view from China's top leaders, but it suggests the Eurozone's successive crises have stirred anxiety and debate in Beijing about the impact on China. Quote, the euro debt crisis has now been going for nearly 2 years since the end of 2009, and the sovereign debt crisis has spread like the Black Death of the 14th century across the Eurozone countries, said the commentary, referring to the rodent-borne pandemic that devastated Europe, the Black Death. The situation in the Eurozone has become so bleak that it has given rise to the most improbable rumors. The latest to make the rounds of European hedge fund managers suggests that the euro will be tied to the dollar at close to parity, a dramatic fall from its current level of just under $1.30, and one that would involve the printing of hundreds of billions of euros. However unlikely, the speculation is an indication of Europe's plight in a world with little growth and every government looking at exports as a way to grow. A cheap currency giving an artificial boost to competitiveness is more palatable than austerity. The euro remains relatively strong for a variety of reasons. Despite domestic tensions, Europeans are not taking their money out of Europe. They're just moving it to safer homes within the region. Moreover, European banks continue to sell off dollar assets and bring the proceeds home. In addition, central banks in emerging countries continue to hold the euro as something of a reserve currency. Meanwhile, the Americans and Chinese prefer to see the euro remain strong since exporters on both sides of the Pacific compete against Europeans. To the extent that the euro does drop, pressure will increase on the Fed to consider another round of quantitative easing to keep the dollar relatively depressed. If the euro collapses, that will be especially bad news for China, though, since 18% of China's exports go to Europe. In April, Chinese exporters to the Eurozone were down 2.4% from a year ago, according to the broker CLSA. Some of those exports were from German makers in China itself. For example, Pakistani tile mills have recently imported capital equipment from Siemens plant on the mainland. But if the euro sinks, German manufacturers will export from home rather than their Chinese factories. That's given. Some analysts suspect that China has been trying to support the euro, and indeed, data from the BNY Mellon suggests that as the growth in Chinese reserves slows, the euro falls. Meanwhile, the liquidity from the excess printing of money, especially in the U.S., continues to spill over into the rest of the world. Since the crisis, once again, liquidity stemming from the U.S. has driven commodity prices up and helped stoke credit booms in many emerging markets, such as in Brazil. That means that while the markets continue to focus on the Eurozone and its troubles, there are other long-term conflicting trends in the currency world that bear watching. They stem both from these flows of developed market liquidity and from the latest economic developments in China. China reported disappointing trade numbers this week, with exports and especially import levels far lower than expected, pointing to a lower growth. But more importantly, analysis such as Stephen Jen of London-based hedge fund SLJ Macro Partners and formerly the head of currency research at Morgan Stanley believe that China is undergoing a major shift in the sources of growth, tilting away from the investment-led growth to a more consumption-driven model. That also raises the stakes for the U.S. and increases the likelihood of another round of easing from Washington. In recent months, exports, especially to China, have been one of the few sources of growth for the U.S., but that growth is slowing now, with some companies seeing slower orders. On Thursday, the U.S. Commerce Department reported that the trade deficit widened $6.4 billion to almost $52 billion as imports rose 5.2% and exports rose 2.9%. That also means countries that have ridden China's coattails, such as Brazil and Australia, may see their own fortunes turned down, since consumption-led growth is far less commodity-intensive than investment-led growth. No country was more of a beneficiary of the liquidity from the developed markets and demand for China than Brazil. But today, many analysts consider the Brazilian real to be the most overvalued currency. A world in which commodity prices are significantly lower may mean that commodity importers will do better in coming years. The central banks of the developed world cannot print money indefinitely. When they stop, it will be the countries that have used the time and money to become truly competitive that will be in the best place. I'm Michael Wordsworth. We got a long show here this afternoon. It's Friday, May 25th, 2012. At 4:26 p.m. It's a beautiful, nice day. And I'll be back in a minute here. Lots of news. If you'd like to call in, please, the number is 414-935-2951. You don't necessarily need to address the Chinese facts and their impact on our global economy, as well as here in the United States domestically. It's a tough subject. It requires a lot of study, and I'm mostly here to just provide these facts, inform you as best I can on the subject today, just so that you're a little bit aware. But feel free to call in on any topic, any of these issues that I've mentioned since this show first started about 8 episodes ago. Michael Wordsworth. I'm going to take a short break. I'll be right back in 42 seconds. And we're back. I'm Michael Wordsworth, and these are words worth listening to. I'm very concerned. Perhaps you should be as well. Are Americans catching what's going on? Are they waking up? Are they unplugging? Well, and to answer that question, I could say that most of the listeners, almost everyone, got the point of the last article, is saying that the impact on China, basically jobs are moving offshore. The military-industrial complex continues to get richer, as Eisenhower said it would. And most people out there, they see all the absurdity of the government's claim that the identity of the tough, macho Navy SEALs who allegedly murdered Osama bin Laden has to be kept secret in order to protect our fierce warriors from reprisals from Muslim terrorists, while those government officials responsible for the torture and deaths of large numbers of Muslims can walk around, identity unknown, unprotected, and safe. A few members of Congress are also awake, but not very many. Indeed, we are losing two of the most aware, Dennis Kucinich and Ron Paul. Dennis Kucinich on the Democrat side and Ron Paul on the Republican side. Two excellent members of Congress. Kucinich was redistricted in order to get rid of his independent voice. He carried 75% of all the votes from that part of his old district that was included in his new one, but the new voters lacked the intelligence to vote for him. Ron Paul, in our time of tribulation, tried for the Republican presidential nomination on a platform of saving the U.S. Constitution. But those who voted in Republican primaries weren't interested in saving the U.S. Constitution. Shame on you, Republicans out there. Shame. Now we are down to U.S. Representative Walter Jones. Initially, Jones was a member of the warmonger crowd. He was angered when the French government cast doubt on the George W. Bush regime's reasons for the need for war in Afghanistan and Iraq. Jones said at that time that he was renaming French fries freedom fries. Do you remember that? That was the guy. Jones unplugged from the Matrix, the mind-controlled state that the American public is kept in through the corporate media. It's propaganda. Jones pulled away from that and has been sentient for some time now. Recently, the tyrant Obama, and I call him a tyrant with all the new legislation being passed, the NDAA, HR 347, the list goes on. This guy, it's like he's setting up for a dictatorship with George Bush's wish that he were the dictator, as long as he's the dictator. And Panetta, a political whore who has been in a variety of government positions and is currently Secretary of Warmongering, announced publicly that the U.S. Constitution, notwithstanding the executive branch, no longer needed the authority of Congress to go to war. In our globalist existence, the authority for the U.S. to initiate hostilities against another country comes from the UN, declared Obama and Panetta. I mean, that's what Congress was told. If the executive branch could persuade or bribe the UN to give a war okay, Congress is no longer relevant. This was too much for the awakened U.S. Representative Walter Jones. He has introduced House Congressional Resolution 107, which clearly states that the president's use of U.S. military is an act of aggression without the consent of Congress as an impeachable offense. And good for you, Mr. Jones. Thank you. There's absolutely no question whatsoever that Representative Jones is correct. However, you can bet that the Obama regime already has a John Yoo-type hireling busy at the work in the Department of Justice, writing legal memos that say the U.S. Constitution gives no authority to Congress at all, not to declare war, not to coin money, not to anything. A person would think that members of Congress would flock to Representative Jones's resolution. I mean, I would. After all, it is Congress's own power that is on the line. Normally, organizations defend their own power. Strangely, the U.S. Congress has not defended its power since Roosevelt's New Deal in the 1930s. Because of the crisis of the Great Depression, Congress gave up its lawmaking powers to the executive agencies created by Roosevelt to run the country. Congress, it pretends to still be in control by having oversight over the ruling executive cabinet departments and agencies. Cabinet secretaries, assistant secretaries, and CIA directors have to go testify and be questioned before congressional committees and all that. Like the Federal Reserve Chairman, who has unaccountable power over interest rates and inflation, but the laws are made by the executive branch. Ever since the 1930s, when Congress passes a law, it merely gives an authorization for some executive branch agency to define the law by writing the regulations. As the executive agency also enforces the regulations, we have the beginnings of tyranny, as the same agency both makes the law and enforces it. So much for the checks and balances, huh? Incredible. The roots of tyranny in America. Tyrants go way back. But in America, I mean, let's just go take it back to the 1930s and even further back to President Lincoln. The decline of Congress, which was created by the Founding Fathers to be a powerful political institution, has been a long-term process. However, in recent years, the decline of congressional power and relevance has accelerated. The Democrats are as responsible for this as the Republicans. It's on both sides. If U.S. law had been enforced and Democrats could have enforced the law, George W. Bush and essentially the entirety of his employees would be in federal prison right now. I mean, think about that. But the Democrats sacrificed the people's power over government in order that the executive branch could protect us from a terrorism for which no evidence exists. No terrorist events have occurred since September 11, 2001, except for FBI-orchestrated plots that never endangered the public in actuality. As for the government's official 911 story, the thousands of experts have their doubts. They question that. So the U.S. Constitution has simply been discarded on the basis of fear. That thing we fought for to establish 200 years ago, no. We're afraid and we can't have it anymore. Fear. The fear of the First Great Depression, and secondly, the fear of Muslim terrorism. The United States of America is the Constitution. I mean, when you take an oath as a police officer or a military member, it's to the Constitution of the United States to defend and uphold the Constitution of the United States against enemies, foreign and domestic, meaning domestic at home here. Enemies from within. There's always been the warning. Don't worry about standing armies looming on your borders to invade. The real threat comes from the traitors in our own system that stab the American people in the back. If the Constitution no longer exists as an enforceable document taken seriously by political elites, the United States no longer exists. Some other entity has taken its place. Think about that. Describe to yourself the characteristics of this new identity, this entity, this creature, without a constitution to regulate it. It'd be easier for older people than for the young who have been born into the new tyranny. They could recognize it. For the young, tyranny is all they know. For the young, tyranny is normal. How old does a person have to be to remember when you boarded an airliner without any security? In previous columns, it's been pointed out by many people that the teeny, essentially insignificant infractions that led to the resignation of, say, President Richard Nixon in order to avoid impeachment. Well, compared to Bush or Obama, Nixon was flawless in his observation of U.S. law and the U.S. Constitution. I'm just saying in comparison. Nobody from the older generation could possibly imagine Nixon saying that the UN could replace Congress' authority to initiate war. Republicans would not have put up with that back then, nor would have Democrats. Or that Nixon could strip U.S. citizens of their liberty and lives on suspicion alone. That's it, without evidence or due process of law, simply on the basis of executive decree. All Nixon did was to lie about when he learned of a burglary of which he had no prior knowledge and no involvement. It got him impeached. What has Obama and Bush done? Led unjust wars, attacked foreign countries without congressional approval, said that they're now listening to NATO more than us. The list goes on and on and on. The loss of our liberty is where we are today. Representative Jones wants to retrieve Congress's war-making power. He wants to rein it in. Says that those Americans who wish to support this goal should inform their senators and representatives and even the local newspapers of this fact. Jones provides the telephone number of the congressional switchboard that can connect you to the 3 offices that allegedly represent you, the constituent. The number, I'm going to give it out on air if you'd like. Why don't you give 202-224-3121 a call? As you know, I keep trying, and so must we all. If we don't keep trying, it means we accept our loss of liberty and accountable government. If we give it now, what was the point of resisting the Soviet threat? Other than profits and power for the military security complex, industrial military complex, which, it doesn't trickle down to us, folks. Now China's manufacturing the items offshore. We don't even get jobs out of it. And the U.S. government and its media whores, prostitutes, Gerald Celente, I don't know if he coined that phrase. Gerald Celente from Trends Forecasters, he calls them prostitutes. I believe that was his. He coined that. Anyhow, they show increasing contempt for the intelligence or lack thereof of the American public. Even Americans spaced out on alcohol, drugs, junk food, television, and sports events remember the name Osama bin Laden. Somehow, this person, formerly an operative of the U.S. government. What? You didn't know that? That Osama bin Laden was an operative of the U.S. government? Yeah, he was, against the Soviet Union. We were told that this guy was the embodiment of total evil. He was responsible for 9/11. He alone. Someone got those 14 guys from Saudi Arabia to come and do. I mean, these guys were living in caves, and somehow the most powerful nation in the world couldn't stop 3 guys or 14 guys from. Unbelievable. President George W. Bush declared that Afghanistan's refusal, apparently another Bush regime lie, to deliver Osama, the alleged perpetrator of 9/11, they were going to deliver him to U.S. authorities. Well, that was the justification for attacking Afghanistan, a country at that time as now with 2 separate governments at war with one another. Shortly thereafter, Osama became magically the reason to invade Iraq, an old U.S. ally who had attacked the government of the Iranian Revolution at the Washington's behest. Suddenly, America's Iraqi ally had non-existent weapons of mass destruction that threatened American cities. In the words of George W. Bush's moronic lie, the National Security Advisor, it was Condoleezza Rice. Remember her coming on and saying, mushroom clouds, mushroom clouds, mushroom clouds. Well, the people bought it here. We condoned it. Now we're paying for it. Maybe we see the absurdity now. Yeah, what Gerald Celente aptly designates as the prostitute media, they played a major role. However, the whores were serving their customers, which are the government and private interests that benefit from war. The American public could have rejected the spin, but they put the yellow ribbon deals, remember those yellow ribbons? I don't see them too much anymore. They put them on their SUVs and saying, and we support the troops. If Americans were puzzled when the U.S. government abandoned its position that Osama bin Laden was responsible for 9/11 and announced a new mastermind, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the prostitutes didn't mention it. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was designated the mastermind in 9/11 because the U.S. government had in custody this hapless individual, perhaps sold to them by warlords for the bounty paid for terrorists, who knows. There's no good in having a mastermind of 911 whom you cannot catch. So Khalid Sheikh Mohammed became the mastermind of 911. Once designated the mastermind, the CIA torturers went to work on him, illegally of course. But who cares, right? Jack Bauer says on that stupid 21 show, it's we're a culture of torturers now. This psychopathic, sociopathic behavior is necessary. It's not. Well, after the Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was waterboarded 183 times with the only evidence against him being coerced self-incrimination. Both the former chief U.S. prosecutor at Guantanamo, his name was Colonel Morris Davis, and General Donald Guter, who was the Judge Advocate General of the U.S. Navy, dismissed the Guantanamo military tribunal trials as show trials or circuses, kangaroo courts. Indeed, the American trials of alleged terrorists are even less lawful than Stalin's show of trials on the Bolsheviks. If you are familiar with Stalin's attack on the Bolsheviks, who created the Russian Revolution in 1917, and Hitler's trials of the German military, who attempted to assassinate him in order to save Germany from destruction. Hey, when America's own chief military prosecutors denounce trials of alleged terrorists, the media and public should take notice. But not in America. where the government believes its own lies as fervently as the brainwashed public believes the prostitute media. Astonishingly, before a show trial could dispatch Khalid Sheikh Mohammed as the new mastermind of 911, the U.S. government has produced a new culprit. It was not Osama bin Laden or Sheikh Mohammed, but Iran that is suddenly now responsible for 911. Boy, do we have a nation of amnesiacs, Gore Vidal said. In a U.S. Federal Reserve Court judgment issued in December 2011, Iran was found guilty of the 911 attacks. That's right. In a U.S. federal court judgment issued on December 2011, Iran was the new enemy responsible for the 911 attacks. I mean, that in itself, it's so apparent what they are doing. It's so apparent that the global war on terror is a hoax designed to just keep the proxy wars rolling and the profits rolling to the rich, not to you and I. While they take down this country. So who's responsible for 911? If it's not bin Laden, why did the Navy SEALs allegedly murder him? If it's not Sheikh Mohammed, why is he being put on trial after being tortured for years? I mean, my goodness, if you're tortured for years, I'm surprised he didn't confess to anything. I would have. That's usually the case. When you torture somebody, they'll confess. The moon, I found the moon in my toilet this morning. It was growing pink and purple hair. It's true. It's true. I'm just trying to say the most absurd thing I could, as you know. That's the confession. Torture me, and I'll tell you anything, please. The answer is that the criminals in Washington who control our lives, they no longer care about any of their previous propaganda. It's so blatant now. They now want to attack another country on totally false pretenses, as does the extreme right-wing Israeli government, the cancer of the Middle East. Some of the Israeli military brass and much of Israeli security intelligence brass, all their generals, they oppose an attack on Iran as an act of insanity, and they're right. Yet little, if any, of the Israeli opposition to war has been reported in the U.S. prostitute media. In order to negate internal opposition, the Israeli Prime Minister has formed a unity government with the main opposition party as the AIPAC stampedes the U.S. Congress into voting for war with Iran. If the unaware American population could be programmed to believe that Iran is the new 911 culprit, well then, Washington can initiate yet another war that enriches the military-industrial military complex with more money, more power, meaning less for us. Will bin Laden's family now sue Washington for blaming Osama for an offense which Washington now acknowledges he was not guilty of? He couldn't. It was Sheikh Mohammed, and then now it's Iran. So I guess they can sue him. Will Sheikh Mohammed be found guiltless? Because the U.S. federal court now says it was Iran that was responsible for 911. These would be the results if America had a justice system that was independent of the needs of the political elites and the private interests that they serve. But today in America, the ruling interests produced by hook or crook justifications for war that serve the power and profit of the military-industrial complex. Whatever the mainstream media tells you serves this interest. So how do we rescue America from its government and from the corrupt media that serves as a ministry of truth for a corrupt government? I don't know. But becoming aware is the start. Not believing the lie is the beginning. I'm Michael Wordsworth. We'll be back in a minute. This just in, Peter brought me this special flyer bulletin. It's called Keep It on the Streets. We have to make our voices heard in order to hold our governor accountable. You know who he is. one of the most famous governors today. Well, Occupy Milwaukee, community allies, and labor unions will march on June 6th to make the following demands of our governor. Number one, repeal Act 10. They demand Wisconsin return to full collective bargaining for public employees. Number two, restore the Equal Pay Act. They demand an end to workplace discrimination. And number three, tax the 1%. Hold the banksters and the 1% accountable for their economic crisis and stop the cuts to working and oppressed people. People, don't buy it. It's not our debt. Don't sign on to it. Reject it like Iceland did. They made sense. They said, it's not our debt. Screw you. Get out of here. And they had to. They won. Solidarity will prevail in this case. This event is going to occur Wednesday, June 6th. The rally starts at 5 p.m. at the Pierre Marquette Park, which is located at 3rd Street and State, basically 3rd and State. And it's sponsored by Occupy Wisconsin, Occupy Milwaukee, 9 to 5, the Welfare Warriors, Peace Action Wisconsin, the AFCME Local 82, Casa Maria, ATU Local 998, SDS, Wisconsin Bail Out the People Movement, Act Everywhere, Occupy the Suburbs, Move to Amend, and Milwaukeeans for a Better Tomorrow. I would have wrote that as Milwaukeeans for a Better Tomorrow today. I like that better, but these people care, and that's the important thing. We can't get hung up on semantics. They have a cause. They have a voice. They want to get it out there. June 5th, they vote. They're going to make their statement on June 5th. June 6th, they say they're going to keep it in the streets. They're not going to let up, and they shouldn't. I tell you what, however you feel about unions, I tell you this, whatever problems they've had with themselves, oh, crap. Whatever problems they've had, I would much rather have a local municipalities run by union members that actually get income that is spent locally. I might actually get some of that money. But some of the Republicans, look, I bitch about both sides, Republicans and Democrats. You're both freaking idiots on both sides in large part. And I see a growing mainstream centrist movement in this country because we're leaving both sides. I just said Dennis Kucinich and Ron Paul are the two out of the best sides, you know, and I mean that. I'd like to see them both run on the same ticket. Might be a good balance because we need a radical 180-degree change around here. It's not going to... unless we make a 180-degree change. But how do the Republicans, I know there's a big issue about unions and the scandals and the problems with them, but I've been talking to people, I've been asking their personal opinions. Those that are in good, decent unions, they see the value of it. They don't want to end up like Chinese slave laborers. And if you're a Republican in name only, which most of you are, you weak, yellow-bellied, warmongering, you go over and fight these foreign wars and support these global elitists and this corporate media that says that we have to do this. You guys do this. You're pathetic. You sicken me. You know, and the Democrats, you guys sicken me too. I bitched about George Bush for 8 years and his warmongering, and I thought that the Democrats were in agreement with me because all the liberals here on the east side, yeah, we don't like Bush. But now when Obama does the same damn thing, you guys are just fine with it. No problem whatsoever. I mean, where are your guts? Where's your sensibility? Where's your brains? You know what? Maybe that's why you're losing the union. Maybe that's why Walker was able to walk all over you, because you've lost your political will. You're too busy acquiescing to the bullshit propaganda out there, aren't you? Hey, the number to call in is 414-935-2951. I'm Michael Wordsworth, trying to goad the public because you're freaking asleep out there and not paying attention. You wonder why you lost your job? Because you're sitting on your butt with your heads up your ass. That's why. Unplug from the TV for 2 damn seconds. Put down the beer and take up an issue. Anything. Do you have a heart left? I guarantee you, when you're being rounded up into FEMA concentration camps, like Japanese interned citizens in World War II or the Jews in Nazi Germany, you're going to remember what was said here today. We don't have time to lollygag. I know it's a nice, beautiful day, and going down to the beach, there's nothing wrong with that. Get out, walk around, do your things, live your lives. I'm not saying stop living. Well, anyhow, Democrats, Republicans, you're free to call in. Thank you, Peter, for this report. I just want to announce again, the people have every right. They want to hit the streets. Wisconsin, whether you're for unions or not, here's the simple fact. Wisconsin has been unionized since day freaking one. We won the labor rights movement. If you were like my grandma and grandpa growing up in the Depression with 10 children, in the Depression, eating dandelions as a salad, dandelion stems, in the Depression, well, hell yeah, you were a democratic, socialist bent type person that was pro-union. You know, and when Ronald Reagan came along and sold us a bill of good hope saying that we're going to turn this all around, the Republicans were fooled, and it seemed that supply-side economics was working. But the trickle-down basically means piss on you, you foolish public. It hasn't helped yet. Now we've had decades, at least those of us old enough to see it, we've had decades to take a look and analyze that bubble-driven economies, as Greenspan and Bernanke put them, aren't real economies. You know what's a real economy? A guy going to work and earning the money. You can print money out of the printing presses, or nowadays it's just a click on the keyboard, but it's not actual capital until you or I go and work for it and pay back our loans. There are many basic, simple facts in this country that people are just ignorant of. I hope to bring them to you. I hope to enlighten your minds. My goal isn't to cause division and separation in this country. It's actually to call upon Democrats and Republicans on both sides that can recognize that we have common interests at heart. There are basic things. What do you really freaking care if a union member is paying too much dues or if there's a scandal in the union? You know what it sounds to me if you were a good Republican? Sounds like an internal problem, something that you traditionally would keep your nose out of. Mind your own business. It's not affecting you. What are your tax dollars subsidizing unions now? Well, if you really cared about your tax dollars, you'd care about the fact that the Chinese can now buy U.S. treasuries directly from the Fed. Well, Wall Street itself is getting cut out. If you cared about your tax dollars, you'd care about this industrial military complex that Eisenhower warned us about. But you don't. You just don't. It's a never-ending battle that's gone on. The people versus tyranny. Since day one, since the very first property owners, you know, going back to Persia and the Semitic peoples, you know what the basic difference between those guys were? The people that worshipped Baal, it wasn't so much a religious battle. It's that the people that served Baal, they believed in property ownership and private property. And the Semitic people, they were a lot like the North American Indians. They said, how God, well, at least the Semitic people claim that God created this. It doesn't, you know, it was given to man, but man doesn't own it. And the American Indians had no concept of land ownership. It was just completely foreign to their consciousness. Well, I'm not here to debate this particular issue, and it doesn't even matter because, look, the world is divided up. There's nowhere to run. That's the thing that really gets my goat and probably gets your goat too. If you're disgusted with it, you've probably done like most people. You've pulled yourself out of society. You've pulled yourself out of the system as best you can. You still have to pay taxes. But nowadays, the IRS, they're going to take away your passports for unpaid taxes. Did you know that? Check it up. Google News. IRS to deny you a passport from leaving this country for unpaid taxes. Well, in a depressed economy, you don't have any job. How are you going to pay those taxes? You know, I know there's a lot of socialists out there. You want free medical care, but look, there's nothing freaking free ever. Everything has a price to it, one way or another. The current Obama Medicare legislation for mandatory health insurance, hey, you know what they're going to do? If you don't pay for it, you got to pay $1,600 in tax revenue that they just take from your check. You got to pay for. If you're a small business, you're trying to have employees, full-time employees that can pay for your family. You can't afford to pay for the health care. And the big corporations like McDonald's and Walmart, these guys only hire part-time, but they're everywhere. They're at all the main streets, been dominated by these mega corporations. You know it. You watched Walmart take over. Guess who started Walmart? The CIA. Who runs the CIA? I don't know, but I know ultimately they're one of the many invisible hands of a global elite. You've heard that term. There's a global elite that is conspiring, as the conspiracists say, to take over the world. Well, it's an old story. There's always been a class warfare. The only difference is peasants like you and I have never been so informed until this era. The internet, really, whatever they thought they were going to use that for, kind of backfired. We're now more educated and informed than others. Well, at least those of us that care or can read. I mean, many of the college or high school graduates, they're passing. These guys can barely read. The entire language is being dumbed down to 38 basic words. The text, and we're so enraptured by entertainment. Look, I don't blame you, but I'm telling you two things. Watching television and eating high fructose corn syrup has scientifically been the evidence is conclusive now. It makes you dumber. That's maybe why you're so stupid out there now, that you can't tell when a threat's a threat. You got these Judas goats, politicians, who they're not just bought and paid for. This isn't just corruption. You don't get into the White House, you don't get into Congress or the Senate unless they got something over you. Now, a couple of guys do. I mean, I don't know if there's any dirt on Ron Paul or Dennis Kucinich. I wouldn't even want to say if there was. I'd like to think there was somebody out there that actually was noble. But basically, if you look at those two guys' voting records, you'll see it's consistent. They were both against the war on Iraq, the invasion of Afghanistan. They're definitely against letting NATO give authorization to President Obama to go invade Libya through proxy wars with, Libya. I know most of you don't even know where Libya it is. It's a country in northern Africa. It's a little west of Egypt. Gaddafi was running it for a long time. Since the 70s, people were not happy with Gaddafi. He was kind of like the Fidel Castro of Libya, in a sense. And he really was, because if you lived in Cuba, you liked Castro. If you lived in Libya, you liked Gaddafi. Yeah, Gaddafi allegedly was reported to blow up some passenger airliner in the 70s. Maybe true, maybe not. But let's not forget the USS Liberty. Google the USS Liberty. I mean, if you're pissed off at Gaddafi for blowing up an airliner, you need to be pissed off for our government for negligently letting our ship get blown apart in the waters and sink to their death. What you say? They didn't teach that to me in high school? They didn't teach you a lot of stuff in high school. It's now been declassified, the Gulf of Tonkin, which I'm going to help them to dumb down American public so you understand the relevancy of this. The Gulf of Tonkin is a bay near Vietnam. You heard of the Vietnam War? You've seen enough movies about it glorifying the damn thing. That's what they used to get you to go into Iraq, by playing video games and like, oh, the war is glorious. Well, there we sunk our own ship. Now it's been declassified. I mean, it's admitted. There's this little thing called the Freedom of Information Act, which demands public disclosure after a certain amount of time when these things become declassified. If you really want to have a lot of fun, just start reading declassified CIA material. It will freak you out. You will begin to understand the impact of what's going on. It's hard to see it when you're living your lives. It's kind of like looking out this window here on Center Street and watching a parade going by. When you get the narrow view of propaganda that's shoved down our throats and you don't pay attention and go outside to sources like alternative media, you're just staring at a little teeny portion of the parade. But the thing has a history and it's going somewhere, and you can't see the relevance of it unless you step back and look at the bigger picture. But they've got it set now. Ooh, if you do that, you're a conspiracy theorist. As if there's never been a conspiracy in the whole of the human existence ever. It's not a conspiracy, it's an agenda. Without a doubt, it's an agenda. When I get back, I'm going to read from a book called Behind the Green Mask, UN Agenda 21. It's one of many programs, a huge one. I mean, this is straight out of the UN. It's unbelievable how it affects every aspect of our lives. And I like to bring awareness to it because when I get called a conspiracy theorist, I just say, please Google Agenda 21. Get Rosa Koire's book, Behind the Green Mask. It's one of the better books I've ever read on the subject. It's very comprehensive, and she developed her information because she was a forensic commercial real estate appraiser. She specialized in eminent domain valuation for 30 years, analyzing land use and property value. And while fighting to stop a redevelopment project in her own city, she researched the corporate, political, financial interests behind it and found that there was this thing called UN Agenda 21. You didn't vote for it. And now city council members, they didn't ask, but the funding, I forgot exactly how she explains it, but funding is routed into this agenda. And they use these nefarious tactics, such as the Delphi technique, to take political will, divide it, figure out who are the dissenters, the opposers, and the leaders, and then they make those guys, they discredit them, they minimalize them by making them appear radical and angry and agitators. Well, of course you're agitated, but it's important when you stand up in those city council meetings and you run into one of these guys, here's a good tip about dealing with them. The first thing is you're going to ask a question, and if that question hits home and is really on target, they're going to take a long time answering you, dodging around the issue until you forgot why you even answered the question. I mean, asked the question in the first place. Your job, if you're an informed Mr. and Mr. America citizen standing up for freedom in these city councils, take this advice. I looked up online how to defeat the Delphi technique, and this is one of the main ways. When you realize that this alleged facilitator that's in there to sell you that their ideas are your ideas and make you blind and just follow them, their job is to discredit you. When you get up there, remain calm, remain articulate, get your notes together and be very succinct. Don't drone it out. Make one point and make them answer your one question. They're going to avoid answering your question. And here's another tip. You and a buddy, you go sit in another part of the room on these city council town hall meetings and don't let them know that you're together, because if you know that, they'll group you together and they'll kick you out of the meeting. They'll minimize you both. So when they don't answer your question, when it's all you stand there and wait for them to babble on. And when they're all done babbling, you say, I'm sorry though, but you haven't answered my question. My question was blah, 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 blah. If that facilitator, that little traitor working for the UN Agenda 21 tells you basically the equivalent of sit down and shut up, then that's when your buddy needs to tag team like in wrestling. You guys probably know wrestling, right? Well, we're tag teaming. Now, your other friend sitting on the other side of the room, he needs to get up and ask the same question. And if that doesn't work, another person needs to until you guys get your answers. And what will happen, what your goal is to use the same tactics that this moderator facilitator is using on you. They're attempting to make you appear agitated and discredit you. Minimalize you is what they call it. Demonize is a better term, but it doesn't, you need to it minimalizes the actual thing going on here. So what you need to do is turn that around on them. Make the facilitator agitated by repeating the ask. You have a right to know. You have a right to ask. They have to answer. You want to turn the public opinion, the poor, weak-minded public. God bless you people out there, but you can be weak-minded. You've been suckered and bred to be a nation of lazy, decadent consumers. And you know what? They don't need your fat cash cow anymore. They don't need you to consume. They just need you to line up and hit them, go broke, go into the prison camps, eat their GMO food, and die. That's your new function in America. You're like, but the rich, they won't be able to sell us crap and they'll go broke. No. The world's already divvied up. I mean, we're talking about the 1% versus the 99%. You know what those percentages represent? that 1%, what is it estimated, Peter, that 1% owns 40% of the wealth or 60% of the wealth?
40 to 60% of the wealth.
Yeah, 40. I mean, I forget all these facts and figures, but that's the general idea. And the 99% of us get to divvy up what's left. That's why we don't have much. That's why we're losing everything. You don't believe it? Look at Detroit. The thing looks like a war zone. Look at L.A. I mean, of course, L.A.'s bustling and booming, but it's just degrading into like something like Haiti. You know, where the Zav around here, how Haiti is. He's been there himself. He could tell you. I should actually have him on about that one, because I was talking to our wonderful producer here. We're at the River West Video Store. Zav put together this radio station, and we really need to thank him because it's given us a community voice. It's allowed me to get on air here. It's allowed Peter to walk in here and bring me this flyer announcing the Keep It on the Streets movement that's coming up Wednesday, June 6th. The rally starts at 5 p.m. at the Pierre Marquette Park on 3rd and State. It's sponsored by a lot of groups that care, including AFCME Local 82 and ATU Local 998. You know, my father, I digress, but I got to mention my father, he was a big union member, and he said back in his day, unions actually had power. I mean, they could get close to Mayor Meyer and his right-hand man, and they could get things done. Nowadays, they don't have power. They don't have will. There's a whole new class of workers out there. A lot of the city workers, these guys, you guys were former engineers, scientists, CEOs, God knows what, and now you're walking around writing up people's for their gutters are rusty or any violation now. It's just insidious. OSHA, the Organization for Labor Rights and Safety, you would think that sounds like a good group. I tell you what, you and 3 guys set up a ladder this summer and try and paint your house. And if you're not tied up there, this happened last summer. I'm speaking about this because this happened to a lot of guys who were trying to paint their house. That you actually have OSHA coming up and asking, who's your boss? Who's doing this? Do you have OSHA certification? Why aren't you guys tied up to the ladder? Look, since I was 15, 16 years old, I was climbing a 40-foot ladder to paint my peak. But that's different. They're saying, well, we're concerned about worker safety. Well, that might not be a problem if we don't have jobs. And that's where it's headed. And this is what the people are fighting for. Keeping unions is keeping jobs. Labor, workers' rights. Otherwise, you end up like communist China. You have no voice. You know how things work over there? Fly-by-night companies pop up left and right, dotting the entire countryside. They hire on a bunch of workers who are desperate to feed their families, make them work on for just a teeny amount, and it's not bad enough that they all already just pay them $1 a day. When the 2-month contract is over for the United States, they close the company, pull all the equipment and bail, run out on them. And the workers show up to work one morning and there isn't a work, and they ain't getting paid. It's actually happened to many of us out there, even in America, but on a smaller scale. Imagine such corruption being institutionalized. It's going to become institutionalized. I was just mentioning today, one of the big problems we have is a term that I would call, I hope I coined this phrase, but encroached economy. That when you corruption becomes encroached in our financial economic system, it's really, take the drug war, for example. Private prisons showing up all the place. A lot of you people are like, yay, make those prisoners work, yay. Well, they're taking your jobs. They're the equivalent of Chinese slave labor. They pay those guys maybe 50 cents a day. I think the Chinese have a better wage. And 1 out of every 100 Americans, 1 out of every 99 Americans, whatever, they are in jail, doing time in a federal or state or local prison or jail. And they're working, they're laboring. And you could say, well, good, I'm tough on crime. Well, if you're tough on crime, you'd be tough on the big, our crime that we can commit on the streets is amateur. It's almost, it lacks efficacy in terms of how much damage the global corporate crimes commit. Children being sold into sex trade. DynCorp, Halliburton, committing all sorts of atrocities all over. Are you bitching about them? No. I mean, we need solidarity in the state, not just over unions. We need solidarity. We need Republicans and Democrats to set aside differences in ideology over issues like abortion that divide us. You know, my attitude about abortion is, if you want to kill your baby, go ahead. I don't condone it, but I definitely don't want it a situation where the government has the right to tell you such things. I used to be pro-choice, but now I'm, I can't say I side with the pro-lifers because so many of them are just idiot, radical Christians that just are so narrow-minded. They don't see the greater point we're trying to make. It wasn't that we're for killing children. We're just so against having the government run our decisions in our lives. But if you care about, if you're pro-choice, then you should be against totalitarian takeover. Well, we're going to talk about the UN Agenda 21. It is one of the main arms of implementation for this takeover. There's many, but this is one that's all too easy to pick on and address. I'm Michael Wordsworth. I'm saying a lot of heavy stuff today. Now, some of it, my vulgarities are leaking out into the show. I apologize, but I get heated on these subjects, and somehow it seems like I'm able to make... We don't have an FCC license yet, so when we get one, you know, we'll say, but I try to refrain from it, but I don't know, I feel like I'm making my point better if I just say it like it is. All right. I'm going to be back in a minute. You're listening to Breaking Down the News. Hopefully callers will call in. The number's 414-935-2951. That number's on the Ustream screen. It's also on the riverwestradio.com site if you really need it, 414-935-2951. Also, we've got an email at breakingdownthenews@gmail.com, as well as a new Facebook page, an attempt to social network. I'd like to thank all the people out there that actually accepted the friend invitation. I'm actually very lame at running Facebook. I had to have my son help me figure the whole thing out, and now that I understand what a great social networking tool it is, I'm kind of hooked on it. I'm not looking to see who like picked their nose last Saturday, I'm not looking to read if you're out of your house so I can come rob you either, because that's a stupid thing. Don't announce out there that, yeah, I'll be gone for the weekend, so all those people that I wanted to feel like were my friends on my friends list now know. Hey, some of those guys are criminals. Craigslist out there, a whole rash of new crimes are occurring. I forgot what city, but boy, you go to show up to buy the gold or the jewelry or the coins or the new TV or the video games, and they just rob you. I've heard about so many robberies lately, not so much home break-ins, but just stupid, incompetent criminals getting greedy and desperate. I mean, they're not even thinking this thing through. They get caught. Now, look, if you weren't in trouble before, you're really trouble when now you got the law after you. I could go on, and I will, till 6 o'clock today. Michael Wordsworth, Breaking Down the News. Back in a moment.
You're listening to riverwestradio.com. FBI headquarters is a huge modern building in the middle of downtown. Cars and trucks drive past the front entrance on this very active street, and these doors will lead us to the elevators that will take us to the office of Deputy Director Hank Polarank.
Welcome to the FBI headquarters. Can I help you?
Yes, I have an appointment with Deputy Director Polarank.
And your name is?
Michael Wordsworth from RiverWestRadios.com, breaking down the news show.
Michael who? No,
The
sorry,
staff
you don't
at the
understand what I'm
FBI was
saying here. Are you
professional
sure you
and
have the right
courteous
one?
as they greeted me, and after a few security complications were smoothed out, I was soon able to get in to do my interview. Michael Wordsworth from Breaking Down the News.
Hey, come on in, take a seat.
And it was an interesting interview. How many terrorist plots has the FBI foiled in the last few years?
We've been busy, very busy with ongoing investigations. It's hard to say off the top of my head. 10, maybe 12?
And out of those 10 or 12 incidents, how many of those were not terrorist plots instigated by the FBI?
None actually.
Not one.
Well, the underwear bomber, that wasn't us.
But it came to light that the underwear bomber was forced onto the plane by a well-dressed man, and he didn't go through security. That wasn't the FBI.
No. Might have been Secret Service. I think they handled that one.
I'd like to quote an article from the New York Times. Can I?
Sure, go ahead.
This is an article by David K. Shipler, published April 29, 2012, and I quote, "But all these dramas were facilitated by the FBI, whose undercover agents and informers posed as terrorists offering a dummy missile, fake C4 explosives, a disarmed suicide vest, and rudimentary training. Suspects naively played their parts until they were arrested. When an Oregon college student, Mohammed Osman Mohammed, thought of using a car bomb to attack a festive Christmas tree lighting ceremony in Portland, the FBI provided a van loaded with 55-gallon drums of inert material, harmless blasting caps, a detonator cord, and a gallon of diesel fuel to make the van smell flammable. An undercover FBI agent even did the driving, with Mr. Muhammad in the passenger seat.
Yeah.
To trigger the bomb, the student punched a number into a cell phone and got no boom, only a bust. What do you say to that?"
What's your point?
My point is it sounds like we really don't have a terrorism problem in America beyond those plots the FBI makes up itself.
What? How did you get in here? Agent Smith?
Be right in.
What is it, sir? Hey, wait. How did you get in here? I don't believe this. He doesn't have clearance, sir. You'll have to come with me.
He doesn't have clearance? How did he get past you?
He snuck in here when I went to pay for the pizza delivery. I was there for a while. I wanted exact change.
Okay, hey, thanks for the interview. That's all I need now.
Sir, stop. Come back here.
He doesn't have clearance?
Thank you. Talk soon. You guys take care.
Security, we have a gate jumper headed for the elevators.
And whereas this interview did not yield all the answers I wanted, I did get to state my point. And as I was leaving the FBI building, I had the realization that making my point was worth the trip. You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com. This just in from Peter as well. He handed me that there's a special Afro-Cuban view on Assata Shakur called The Eyes of the Rainbow. This will be held Friday, May 25th, which is today at 7 p.m. at the Dominion Gallery, a wonderful, wonderful gallery located at 804 East Wright Street. At 7 p.m., they will be showing the film Eyes of the Rainbow. If you're out there listening, if you're listening to the archive, it's too late. But if you're out there listening live, you can, and you have nothing to do tonight, please check this out. It's one way to stay informed on many of the issues. It's a full-color film, presents former Black Panther Assata Shakur in the context of Cuba's vibrant African culture. It's directed by Gloria Rolando, acclaimed independent African-Cuban filmmaker. This film is the final event in conjunction with the art exhibit Humor from My Pen, featuring over 30 pieces of prison artwork by Gerardo Hernandez.
Gerardo Hernandez, one of the Cuban Five, was sentenced to 2 life sentences in a controversial Miami trial for non-violently attempting to deter terrorism in Miami against Cuba and the people who support dialogue with Cuba. His work can be seen at Dominion Gallery through May 26th, and tonight they are showing Eyes of the Rainbow at 7 p.m. Hopefully we'll see a turnout out there. Assata Shakur, in her own words, I'd like to leave you with this. She says, quote, "My name is Assata," which means she who struggles, Shakur, which means the thankful one. And she is a 20th century escaped slave. Because of government persecution, she says, "I was left with no other choice than to flee from the political repression, racism, and violence that dominate the U.S. government's policy towards people of color. I am an ex-political prisoner, and I have been living in exile in Cuba since 1984. I have been a political activist most of my life, and although the U.S. government has done everything in its power to criminalize me, I am not a criminal," she says, "nor have I ever been one." I'm going to take your word on that, Assata. Apparently you actually care. I'd apologize, but it ain't even my place. I care. If I could do anything about it, I would. This whole event is sponsored by the Wisconsin Coalition to Normalize Relations with Cuba. You can find them at www.wicuba.org. Dominion Gallery, Latin American Solidarity Committee, and the WIBOP. For gallery hours, please call the Dominion Gallery 414-581-0978. Once again, that movie's at 7 p.m. tonight, Friday, May 25th. And the number to call the Dominion for reservations, I'm sure you need a reservation. No, you don't. But if you have any questions to call the Dominion Gallery, 414-581-0978. All right, we're back, and we're talking today about UN Agenda 21. Ouch. I got about a half hour left here, and I want to cover this topic because you just Google UN Agenda 21. For the love of God, just Google UN. It's the letter U, the letter N, agenda. For you, those of you that were brought up in public schools, that's AGENDA 21, which are 2 numbers, a 2 and then a 1. You need to know about this. If you're out there and you're saying, "Oh, I don't care about these things," you're going to care. They move from an international to local tyranny in one easy step through this UN Agenda 21. Now it's time for the big picture. I'm reading from Rosa Koire's book, Behind the Green Mask, UN Agenda 21. Here's the Green Mask story. She says, "We discovered recently that the planet is heating up fast. The ice caps are melting. Sea levels are rising. Biodiversity is threatened. There are too many people. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas contributing to the rise in temperature. For use of oil and natural gas combined with development in the world's rural areas is intensifying global warming climate change. We have to change it fast. Time is running out. Celebrities, officials, and all sane people agree that the planet is in danger, and we, the people, are the cause." Well, enter the International Council on Local Environmental Initiatives. It's the International Council, a council of foreign interests covering local environmental interests. Sounds like somebody finally got organized and is trying to do something. That's what you'd like to believe, and you're probably a good person and therefore naive. That's why we tend to believe the lies that they put out. Well, this council was created in 1990 as a non-governmental organization to implement Agenda 21 locally around the world. ICLEI, as the acronym is pronounced, brings the international into your town. You don't need aldermen anymore. You've got ICLEI. You don't even need a mayor. You've got a foreign interest government group, non-governmental group, but acting essentially as a government, a titular leader in your local councils. According to the ICLEI's international website, ICLEI.org, members, quote, come from 70 different countries worldwide and represent 569,885,000 people. Surprising that you never heard of it, isn't it? With all the 569 million people, and you never heard of this. It is a lobbying and policy consultant designed to influence and change local government policies related to all aspects of human life. All aspects. You've noticed that ICLEI was founded before the 1992 Rio Earth Summit, where the formal precepts of Agenda 21 were first introduced to the world. ICLEI, and that's a good name because they're kind of icky, ICLEI sells training to governments, sets up climate adaptation programs, measures and monitors community greenhouse gas emissions, and more for a fee. Recently, ICLEI changed its name so that you wouldn't notice that it's an international organization. It's now just called the ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. Here's what it says on ICLEI's own website, which you can find at ICLEIusa.org. It says, connect, innovate, accelerate, solve. Doesn't that sound appealing? Let's all connect, and then let's drink coffee and sugar up and feel innovative, and then let's accelerate, because that's kind of like an action term, to accelerate. I feel like I'm taking action. And then solve. Now, I'm reading with that voice of facetiousness because I want to make the point. I'm not for any of this stuff. And here's what they say on their website. The pace of global environmental change, the degradation of ecosystem services globally, and the overshoot of the human footprint on Earth require an acceleration of local efforts. Well, it's kind of funny that they put it that way because, anyhow, even if all 1,100 plus local governments forming ICLEI's membership performed in the most advanced manner, and if it were to extrapolate those efforts into the future, those valiant efforts alone would not reach a sustainable level of resource consumption and pollution in communities, better known as the ecological footprint of cities. They say experts confirm what all of us feel. We must act more rapidly and collaboratively and strive for more radical solutions. Radical solutions, huh? Well, to accelerate action, ICLEI invites to the table leaders from a wide array of sectors who have a stake in urban sustainability. You know, has a stake in urban sustainability? Pretty much everybody in the city. Local governments, regional and national governments, international agencies, financing institutions, nonprofits, academia, and the business community. They are mayors and entrepreneurs, scientists and agency heads, ministers, CEOs, strategists, organizational leaders. They are innovators, decision makers, agenda setters, and agents of change. Oh, they're agents of change, all right. Kind of like the change Barack Obama promised you, which was basically, we're going to replace a white president with a black president, and you ain't going to know the difference when he continues to do the same thing as the previous guy. Well, that about covers it. Did you feel the sense of urgency that they tried to panic in that message of the, we have to connect, innovate, accelerate, and solve? It sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Makes you want to take action. Well, that's a tactic of UN Agenda 21, to keep you panicked, nervous, unfocused, anxious, and scattered. It's a fact that people don't think clearly when they're in a panic mode. Confusion and information overload are part of the Delphi technique. Radical solutions and accelerated action are required to survive. Notice that even every local government in ICLEI performed in the most advanced manner into the future that would not be enough to reach a sustainable level. Feel that panic? Not buying it? Well then, let's pass some legislation to make you buy it. But first, let's see what you're buying. Again, from ICLEI.org. Here's what you receive as becoming a member of the ICLEI. You get clean air and climate protection, software and training. Oh, that sounds good. Tools, and I'm reading this. It sounds funny because I'm being sarcastic, but they're claiming that you're going to get clean air and climate protection, but you're not. They're claiming that you're going to get tools, guidebooks, case studies, and other resources, including a library of local government sample ordinances, policies, resolutions, and other documents. Oh, that sounds great. They're claiming that you'll get webinar trainings and regional workshops. You get state, regional, national, and international peer networking opportunities. Well, you know what that means. You go along to get along, you're going to get networked into their sick little organization. Who knows what kind of benefits that entails. You'll get okay, I don't want to read this whole list because they promise a lot and they deliver little to nothing, and it's the end of America. Okay. They mentioned the local government sample ordinances for libraries and policies. Does that sound familiar? And by the way, this can run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. The big one here is the clean air and climate protection software and training. That's the key. Once your city or county signs onto membership with ICLEI, paid for with your tax dollars, or becomes a climate resilient city and makes a commitment, boy, I hope aldermen are listening to this today, and makes a commitment, the trap is clamped down on you. You are on the conveyor belt towards the buzzsaw. And I want to mention, too, when I mentioned aldermen, to interrupt this report, we have an alderman here in the 5th District, Jim Bowl. I just found out in mainstream media news. That's how I learned about it in my local news. I had to go to the mainstream, and actually I got it from alternative news. I'm sorry, not mainstream. I don't think this would make mainstream. I got it from alternative news. Information about our local 5th District Alderman, Jim Ball, is set to develop a petition to end water fluoridation in Milwaukee. Now, I can't tell you how many people support him. Actually, I can. I can tell you how many people support him. Not the exact number, but a lot. A lot of the people that I talk to are aware of what hexafluorosilicate is and what it does and how damaging and bad it is and how it does nothing for tooth decay. But this alderman, this brave soul, is taking on this issue virtually by himself. And we need to get behind him. I'm going to call him Monday. I tried today, but the offices were closed at City Hall. Must be a nice day. I don't blame him. Get out there and enjoy it. But I'm going to call him Monday. I'm going to ask Mr. Jim Bowl, Alderman Jim Bowl, if he will in fact appear on this show, because we want to provide him with all the community support we can. I want this fluoride out of my water. I'm sick of going to coffee shops and you guys not having reverse osmosis filters. Actually, I drink a lot of coffee at Fuel Cafe. I'm not sure if you got filters on those things, but I want them on there. I'll pay for them myself. I mean, we'll take up a collection. You know, can we get the fluoride? You see, you gotta have a filter that'll go down to 0.4 microns. It'd be either reverse osmosis or KDF type filters. And Stone Creek's got them. I asked them. They said, we have a KDF filter. And I said, no kidding. That's awesome. And you know what? I try to drink my coffee there whenever possible. Just you got Fuel next door here, and I run on coffee. So please, Scott, if you're listening, God, it's a couple $100, man. Just go out and get a reverse osmosis. I hope you do. I mean, I hope you're not mad that I mentioned this, but this Alderman Jim Bowl is concerned about this. This is a huge issue, and I'm trying to raise awareness here. I give a lot of money to Fuel Cafe on a daily basis. That's not the point. I love the place. I keep coming. I just want my local, and I know like a guy like Scott, you know, he cares about the local business. He is a big chunk of local business. It's been kind of he's got all those places. I don't want to mention them. I mean, give you too much free advertising. But yeah, please, Scott, call Alderman Jim Bowl and ask him why he's so concerned about fluoride in the water. Why do we have to filter it out? I mean, we pay money to put it in. It's a poison. Tanker spilled on the concrete once in Michigan. It's got a little poison symbol right on the tanker when they bring it in, and the fake experts hired by the opposition, they say that, oh, well, all things are poisonous in certain measures. Even oxygen even water would be poisonous. Okay, but now I'm going to get into arsenic in the chicken. How the chicken industry insists that they have to put arsenic. It makes it nice and pink, and it does a whole other variety of things for preserving the chicken. But you're eating arsenic. And where it's true that there is arsenic naturally found in apples, there you find a truly insignificant amount. It's a complicated subject. I'm going to stay on UN Agenda 21. We're going to the 6 o'clock hour. The number to call in is 414-935-2951. Would be nice to hear from the public every now and then. If you're listening to this archived, of course, you can't call in. If you like the show, you like the information that I'm bringing you here, if you want to disagree or agree, you need to call in between the hours of 3:30 and 5, or Monday and Wednesday, or 3:30 to 6. On Friday, we're here live, or at least I am. Got the other people here in River West. Every now and then, customers come in to the video store here, and they hear me ranting on. And you know what's great is they look over and they give me a thumbs up, or they give me an approving look, saying like, hey, I'm hearing what you're saying and I like it. You know, I'd like to think somebody, well, that's why I'm here, people. I'm not just here to I got better stuff to do on a nice day like this. I'm looking forward to going out in a minute. I got children at home. I got a family. I feel these issues are important. I'm taking my free time, combing the news every day, putting this information out for you. I'm not asking for anything in return other than just listen and wake up and tell other fellow mammals like yourselves that we're in danger. Well, here we're going to go. We got somebody playing piano in the background, and I don't know if you can pick that up on the thing, but it's a free-for-all zone here sometimes. Very creative atmosphere. So anyhow. ICLEI, the sick organization, the International Council that decides your local issues and what should be done about them. They're very active. You might not be organized as a people out there, but these people are. They're ready to make decisions for you and then convince you through the Delphi technique. Look up Delphi technique. It's spelled DELPHI technique. I'm not going to tell you how to spell technique. You need to know how to spell technique. Well, anyhow, they have milestones that they want to accomplish in your behalf for your safety, just like the government wants to take away your liberties and freedoms for your safety and security. Milestone number 1, they want to conduct a climate resilience study. Conduct a climate resilience study. Why don't you stop taking pesticides and herbicides and putting them on your lawn and then letting them run off into Lake Michigan and poison things? You want to start there? Do a climate resilience study on that. Milestone 2 that they want to accomplish, set preparedness goals. I don't even know what that would mean. Just stand by ready to screw you when possible when they can get away with it. Milestone 3, develop a climate preparedness plan. I mean, what the hell is that? I hope this book explains it because they just don't know. They want to, number 4 is publish and implement preparedness plan. And then 5, monitor and evaluate resiliency. You know what I like about their 5 milestones? One thing I do like, these guys have a plan of action. They're going to introduce said plan, develop said plan, see that they can have it implemented, and then they're going to monitor it and reevaluate it for resiliency. Why aren't we that organized? I mean, in the Bible, that's why Jesus addressed the topic, why do the heathen rage? And his answer to the apostles was, because they're at least united. Evil is united, although evil can't trust itself. I mean, it'll turn and stab itself in the back. They at least are united in their common evil goal. The good people of the world, they're not united. It's an unclear objective, and when you don't know what the goal is, the relationship steps you take towards that goal will be unclear too. Well, Rosa Corey asks, how does this fit all together? And the answer she provides, you were in a Delphi meeting where you were told that multi-story housing must be built along bus or rail lines in your town. And that sounds good. We got to build multi-story housing along the bus and rail lines. That's so people don't drive cars, right? And they can get to work and sounds good. And that the current design of buildings and streets in your city center is all wrong. Oh, gee. Well, actually, I'd love to redesign the city, but that's a job for civil engineers and planners. Everybody likes SimCity, building that thing. Well, you were told that living the rural or suburban lifestyle is bad for the planet, and that you drive too much, you eat too much, you water garden too much. You know what this reminds me of? It's like when they told you stink and you need to use all these products that they sell you that actually poison you and just cover up your smell. You stink because you're eating bad food and your body can't process it. Well, they're saying you use too much energy, and you energy users are destroying the planet with your selfish attitude. And what's the alternative? That we all live in grass huts? Drink water from a well and don't use any energy? How is this going to help the world? I really don't see. It's not going to save the planet as we, the poor peasants, live even more like peasants. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes it's just not fun living down in the trenches of poverty. Well, anyhow, because your city conducted or is in the process of conducting a climate resiliency study to measure your greenhouse gas emissions, chances are you're somewhere in that milestone list and pressure is on. Your city or county's general plan has been changed to conform to UN Agenda 21. Remember, though, that they want your buy-in so that they can say it's your plan. Why? Well, because it's easier when you're cooperative. And after all, revolution is bad for business. Yes, this is a big business scheme. The biggest, actually. The carrot for you, the mule, the mule, I mean, that's what it said. It's a carrot before the horse, is that you'll be saving the planet from imminent disaster if you follow the new rules. And if you don't want to, the stick you get upside the head is legislation. We'll look at legislation a bit later, but first let's look a little bit more closely at ICLEI itself, the International Council on Messing with Your Local Legislation. You've heard the term NGO? Nah, you probably didn't, but when you listen to this show, you might. Non-governmental official, and no, it means non-governmental organization. Apologies, it's not official, it's non-governmental organization. Could be official too. I've heard it used that way, but maybe I just misunderstood it. It's not my term, it's the term that ICLEI made up, or the UN uses, NGOs. You now don't elect representatives, you have non-governmental organizations doing it for you. I guess we don't even need to vote anymore. From that, you naturally assume that it means nonprofit, and that implies to all nonprofits. It's jargon, it's lingo. An NGO is a nonprofit corporation that is independent from government control, as was defined in 1945 by the United Nations themselves. Nonprofit does not mean that that the corporation doesn't make money. And that's it. Just basically means they don't have to pay taxes, which is kind of funny. I got to interject into Rose's book here. You know who else doesn't pay taxes? Churches. They never had to pay taxes because of the First Amendment states that Congress shall make no laws regarding the establishment or running of religion. And that means you can't tax them. You were already covered. You didn't need a 501c3 nonprofit status to run a church, but they convinced you did, and then they gave all these inner city ghetto churches and all these crazy radical revival movements money to go around brainwashing the people. But I digress. I'm talking about a nonprofit corporation that actually does make money here, these NGOs. Chapter 27 of UN Agenda 21 focuses on the role of NGOs in implementing the agenda worldwide. NGOs are used to blur the line between government and the private sector. Private sector, that means you. Any business that the citizens run. As governments become less able to maintain staff, they will contract out for services with organizations, civil society organizations, which are not accountable to the people. Why do you vote if this is the case? Why even have representatives? ICLEI is such a group. It has special consultative status to the United Nations, a position held by only a handful of the millions of nonprofit groups worldwide. Made up of government employees, nonprofit environmental and transportation planning groups, and for-profit industries. ICLEI is making legislation and policy in accordance with international law that impacts you. Down here in the trenches, ICLEI is the implementation arm of UN Agenda 21 Sustainable Development. It fragments into and influences so-called local groups that pressure your government for more regulations. Does it bother you that a non-governmental organization is made up of local governments? It should. It's a private group holding meetings that are not open to the public. ICLEI, a so-called non-governmental organization, is representing local governments in international UN climate conferences. States cannot have a foreign policy. That's in our Constitution. No treaty, alliance, or confederation can be made by states and local entities. ICLEI is receiving federal funding. Federal Internal Revenue audits available online for tax years 2005 and 2006 show that ICLEI received over $1.7 million in 2005 and just over $1 million in 2006 from 4 federal agencies: the Commerce, Environmental Protection, International Development, and Agriculture. ICLEI's federal identification number, are you ready for it? They actually have one. They have a federal ID. It's 043116623. Type that into Google and I bet you it'll come up. The IRS Form 990 for tax year 2009 shows that ICLEI had $4,553,618 in income. That was for tax year 2009 alone from all sources reportable to the U.S. Remember that one of the sections of UN Agenda 21 was strengthening the role of major groups? Well, you can check the membership list at ICLEIusa.org to see if your municipality is a member. But it's likely that ICLEI has tentacles into your town even if you don't see it on the list. The list is out of date online and doesn't show cool mayors, sustainable cities, or cool counties. Check those too. The STAR program is a new one with 10 pilot cities. STAR, S-T-A-R, is the next big step. It's an acronym for another organization that runs your life. Here's what ICLEI says about it. We have found that educational policy programs are not enough. Networks and best practices are not enough. Software tools and consulting are not enough. Well, all right. I don't even want to read this stupid statement. That's their opinion. This STAR, this organization called STAR, is going to be everywhere soon. Look for that name. Greenhouse gas emissions are being tracked, measured, and logged by ICLEI. Carbon offset trading, greenhouse gas emission goals, and legal statutes are designed and lobbied for ICLEI. Is your city a STAR pilot city? You should look online and find out. Here's an excerpt from a New York Times article on May 23rd, 2011. They said, they actually reported in the mainstream media, across America and in Congress, the very existence of climate change continues to be challenged, especially by conservatives. The skeptics are supported by constituents wary of science and concerned about the economic impacts of stepping up regulation. Well, hell yeah. Yet even as the debate rages on, city and state planners are beginning to prepare. Are they? I didn't know. We should find out. Dang, you know what I just realized? I should find out. Since I'm the one bringing this awareness to our attention here in the city. I don't know if anybody else knows about this stuff. I guess I got to look into this. I'm calling Alderman Jim Bowl on Monday, and we're going to ask him to get on the show to get out that water fluoridation issue. Boy, I applaud him. Thank you, sir. Thank you. You are truly a red-blooded American. You are a good human being because you are helping to save us. We need representatives like you. There's a lot to refute, but let's note that ICLEI is called an association of local governments. People who question are mainly conservatives, wary of science, they say, and traditional planning is being stealthily changed. Your city county has been committed to reducing your carbon dioxide greenhouse gas emissions. It's likely you've been committed by your local government in response to legislation passed by your state. You are now required to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. in her county, in Rosa Juarez County, she states, which is Sonoma County, Northern California, the government has committed to reducing their carbon dioxide output by 25%, below 1990 levels of 2015, 4 years from now. This is happening across the nation. Here's the obvious question. When were Sonoma County carbon dioxide emissions at 25% below 1990 levels? What year? You can't find that info anywhere. How many people were in the county at that time? Don't know, since we don't know the year, but the county population has grown since 1990. So if we're talking about per capita reductions and we don't know what the population was at the time that we were supposedly at 25% below 1990, this goal will place us at a greater percentage than a reduction of 25% on a per capita basis. It's about control, people. The county doesn't even know what year it's trying to go back to. The county wasn't measuring greenhouse gases back in the 80s or the 70s, but the goals will be put out our farming, and this is what it ends out to. They want to end the farming industry and energy usage, businesses, production, livelihoods, back to some fictitious level in the past. There's just a number to some people, but we don't know what the consequences will be. What impact will this have on our food production, on our ability to work and continue to be financially independent? Will we be so restricted and regulated that we become totally dependent on the government for our food, housing, and income? Then what? Will we be living in smart growth slums, traveling on buses, routed only where we are permitted to go, restricted to working in our transit village? Well, the Zav on the floor has given us the official signal that it's time to wrap up this show, and I want to thank everybody. We have another, what's coming on next? What's the next show?
My Dinner with Gabe.
Pardon?
My Dinner with Gabe.
Oh, My Dinner with Gabe. It's hard to hear with these headphones on. Okay, My Dinner with Gabe is coming up, and he's got some dinner. It's making me hungry. I'm Michael Wordsworth, and I'm out of here. You guys have a wonderful Friday. Peace out.
What do we got?